That intro is extremely long, and I know I've said that a bunch of times, but it's getting corrected finally. Next week, next week we'll have a shorter intro finally. After what did we talk about? 2 years, 2 years. So yeah, definitely need to shorten that one up a little bit. But anyway, we are back to talk about some CFL. Last week we missed an episode that was completely on me. Pretty busy week last week, so unfortunately I was not able to make myself available. But anyway, how are you doing this morning, Michael?
I wouldn't say it was all on you. I mean, I had a Sunday morning gaff that I forgot about, so that I had to take care of, and it didn't reschedule with you ahead of time. So it kind of
Mm.
partially my fault there. I got to take some of that blame. I'm good though, man. Ready to talk some CFL action, some 12-man action up there up north. So I love the
Exactly.
CFL, man.
It's been a fun season so far, and honestly, like it seems like every year there's trends that are kind of figured out pretty quickly. And this year, I don't know how you feel, but I personally don't feel like we're following any of the trends that we normally would follow at this point in the season, and it's kind of up in the air sometimes. Who's going to win and who's going to lose? Perfect example is this past weekend. I think more often than not, people are picking Saskatchewan, but Calgary came out the victor, and they're looking a lot better than a lot of people gave them credit for this offseason. That's for sure.
I'm the Calgary fan, and I was a little, cautiously optimistic, as I like to say, being a Washington fan for as long as I was, I should say. It really, honestly, it is surprising, but I also think that this goes to show how a dedication of a organization wants to be at committing at winning, because with the way the CFL contracts work, you know, we don't really get the years. Like, it's not announced the same way as it is in like the NFL. Like, every contract comes out, you know the years, you know the finances behind it. The CFL doesn't really have that, but it does go to show that there is a way to do this, and a 1 year rebuild, which is kind of a rare thing for a lot of football, organizations in general that have multiple year contracts. Like the NFL, it's very hard to do a 1 year rebuild. You might end up striking gold like Washington did last year with Jaden Daniels, getting the right coaching staff in there and players that believe in the system. But that is an anomaly for the most part. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen very often. But you take a look at Vernon Adams, a lot of people wrote him off because of injury concerns. Dude's playing like an MOP candidate right now. It's just they're doing everything right. Now it's still a long season. There's still a little ways to go, but at this particular moment in time, this win against Saskatchewan and beating Winnipeg earlier in the year, I think this cements Calgary as a legitimate Grey Cup contender this year, which is something that I don't think anybody was going to say at the beginning of the year or in preseason.
I agree. I agree. And even I was pretty high on the Stampeders this offseason, and I still wouldn't have, pegged them as a Grey Cup contender this early. I think they had a lot of pieces. They're fairly young, important pieces, starting players at this point, especially. So I think it was one of those things where I definitely had faith in what they did and to make these moves to bring in PJ Walker and Vernon Adams and all these other offensive weapons, and they've done fairly well so far, but probably quite a bit better than I expected personally. So it's been fun to watch so far. I think they're kind of the big surprise of the season so far, and I mean, we might as well just go ahead and get right into this topic to start off since we're already talking about him. But Damien Alford, got his first start this past weekend for Calgary and took advantage of the game big time. Immediately putting up over 100 yards, and honestly, just showed that he can be a true weapon in the CFL, and right away, obviously, because he's still a rookie, and this is only what week 6, I think, that we're heading into now. So just unbelievable performance by him. But I mean, like you said, you're the Calgary fan, so what are your thoughts on Alford so far?
Well, if you remember going back to the draft episode we did where he got taken first overall, I was really kind of excited about the pick. I didn't expect him to adapt as quickly as he did, but I did mention that his game fits perfectly into what the CFL does. And Calgary just happens to have the right combination of leadership at quarterback and the quarterback to be able to help this guy grow. And I don't know much about the behind the scenes aspect of what's going on up in Calgary as far as the coaching staff is concerned and whatnot, but somebody along the way over the course of these last 4 or 5 weeks has brought Damien Alford along. Now, we saw flashes in the preseason. We talked about the preseason, but the overall talent that Damien Alford has, it's a perfect fit of size, speed, hands, ability to get open. Like, he's shifty. He's a lot shiftier than what most wide receivers his size are, especially at the CFL level. So I think it's a perfect blend. And then you add Vernon Adamson, who's playing lights out football right now, and it's a recipe for success. Now, as long as everybody stays healthy, I think that Damien Alford is going to continue to give defenses nightmares up there. He is going to be very difficult to guard, and I think that's going to be a testament to any of the cornerbacks. I mean, Saskatchewan to me is still a Grey Cup contender. They're still one of the best teams in the league, and look what he did to that secondary. And they're one of the more balanced teams in the league. So when you start getting further on in the season and injuries start piling up, like Ottawa, which we'll touch base on, when you start facing those teams that are having the secondary issues, it could be a very long season for the rest of the CFL as long as Damien Alford continues doing what he's doing.
Completely agree. I mean, you said it well. 6'6", 224 pounds, and the guy moves, much better than he should for his size. And honestly, I have to ask, I mean, do you have any concerns that maybe an NFL team sees what he's doing up here and comes in and swoops him up for 2025 or 2026? I'm sorry.
No, and it's not a testament to that Damien Alford doesn't have like the talent to be up there. It's just the NFL has a tendency to not really, unless there's like a coaching staff or a certain coach that comes down from the CFL or that was with certain teams or people that have connections to a certain team. Like, there's really not going to be enough NFL teams that are going to be looking up north and going, you know what, we need to go get Damien Alford. Some teams might bring him in, for a workout or, bring him in as a camp body possibly. But I think overall, I think what's going to happen is I think teams are probably going to just be like, that's 12-man football. They're a little bit different, the translation for wide receivers from the CFL to the NFL or the position players, generally don't translate as well as like offensive linemen, defensive linemen, or linebackers do. You don't have the same amount of success as you would at some of the other positions. So, some teams may look at him, bring him in for like a little camp body type thing or a little bit of like a workout stuff. But I don't know if it's going to garner enough attention. Maybe if he did 2 years of this, then maybe you'll start seeing a little more buzz around it. But right now, I'm not super concerned because NFL teams have already looked at him and passed once. So it's just, this isn't like a Canadian wide receiver. This is the guy who played down here in America. He's an American receiver. Pardon me. He's an American receiver. So there is a very good opportunity. There's a very good chance that NFL teams have already looked at him and seen him and decided to pass on him once. So it's very possible that, like I said, camp body, but I'm not worried too much that he's going to get taken from the CFL to go play in the NFL.
Fair enough. I'm actually on the other side of that. I think once they kind of realize what he's been able to do over the past couple of games, he's probably going to get some calls, and maybe ultimately he does not end up getting signed down in the NFL. But I mean, this is a guy that we talked about it in the draft. I think he was severely hurt in terms of his NFL draft stock because of what happened in Utah. Before that at Syracuse, if he had just continued down that path, it looked like he was trending to be a rather big part of their puzzle. And, he ultimately transfers to Utah, does not catch a pass for an entire season, only appeared in 4 games, and then suddenly the dude's in the CFL. But, I mean, when you talk about his athletic ability and what he brings to the table in terms of his size, I mean, like I just said, 6'6", 225 pounds. The dude runs a 4.4. That's rare athleticism. So I think that's one reason why, NFL teams might look at him a little bit different than most CFL receivers.
Well, and that's a
Excuse me.
fair point, but you mentioned all the accolades and all that stuff, but other guys that have had that in the past, Darius Hayward Bay had very similar size and speed. Kind of faltered out because his game didn't really adapt to the NFL. Now that could be a coaching issue. Like they could not have adapted their offense around him, whatever it may be. And Alford definitely what happened, probably definitely made a mistake transferring to Utah by all means. I think we can completely, agree to that. And I'm sure he understands that too. It's just that I don't know if there's NFL teams barring like weak wide receiver rooms or injury prone rooms that might look up north for that, considering the landscape of how many wide receivers come in every year from college. So I honestly, I would like to see him continue to stay at the CFL. And that's just because I think he can build a brand name up there and really become a household name up there and make something of himself. Um, but that's just because me, I'm always about building a brand and not getting yourself buried on the depth chart where you're not going to play. Because if he comes to the NFL, what's the chances of him being on the field on a consistent basis? It's probably not super high. His athleticism might get him on the field for some, but he's not going to do what he's doing right now in the CFL. And it's going to become a Utah situation when you transfer out of Syracuse.
Definitely fair. Definitely fair. And that is one of the dangers of the transfer portal, right? So at the end of the day, I think that he probably looks back and wonders what would have been if he hadn't transferred out of Syracuse for that last season. But uh, hindsight's always 2020. But honestly, I don't think he's in a bad spot. Obviously, it could be a lot worse for him. He's in the CFL. He's now starting for his team, making a big impact. I think he's, trending the right direction. If you look at how he started to how he got to yesterday, I mean, literally the first 2 games he played, he had 2 receptions. His third game, another 2 receptions. Then all of a sudden, his fourth game, he's targeted 8 times, catches 6 passes for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, kind of crazy to see his offensive explosion out that quickly, but it's definitely encouraging for the rest of his career. And like you said, I mean, if he stays up in the CFL, obviously you can't say for sure after 1 game, but it certainly looks like he's trending towards being a future star in the league and a guy who can legitimately build a brand and build up a following based on what he's able to do in the CFL. So I definitely think that, as far as that goes, we could be looking at the growth of a future superstar. Have to throw that out there, right? But,
I was just about to say the CFL doesn't have superstars though, so.
Well, I personally, in my opinion, I think that term's a little relative depending on what league you're talking about. But I can understand the thought process that some people are not necessarily considering these guys superstars because they're not like worldwide names. But I think for anybody following the CFL, they know who these guys are.
I can't understand that process. Like I get it. I understand what he's saying, but I can't get behind that because it's like you said, it's got to be relative to the league. Like you have to not everything needs to be compared or on the same base level as the NFL. Like I understand the NFL has been the worldwide dominant one for years to come, and they're the most successful, blah blah blah. But it's comparing everything to it. You're doing your league that you are getting paid by and working for a disservice by continually comparing yourself to the NFL when the NFL has had a huge following of a different type of football. It's not even the same type of football. So I think that that's something that people just need to stop doing. And I wish that he hadn't have done it specifically because you're in a prominent position in the CFL. and you have superstars. William Stanback's been a superstar for years. Andrew Harris has been a superstar for years. You know, like Eugene Lewis is cementing himself as one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. So, like, stop and just focus on what you have in front of you and give the credit to the players in that specific league, and just stop comparing yourself to the NFL. It just drives me nuts, man. Like, it's just
No, that is completely fair. I think that's unfortunately just how casual fans go about it. You know, I mean, at the end
yeah,
of the day, they relate back to the NFL because that's what they know, and that's fair for sure. It definitely makes me wonder if the CFL as a whole wouldn't be better off in trying to use their efforts towards expanding their brand globally, but not necessarily in the in the U.S. Specifically because of the presence of the NFL and the UFL and all these other competing brands that are going to cause these comparisons. Although, you know, obviously you don't want to backtrack on the progress you've made already, given the CBS Sports partnership and all of that stuff. So I think at the end of the day, you know, it's just one of those things that we're going to have to live with long term. You know, people are just going to always look at this as, you know, the little brother to the NFL, as long as we still have the NFL. So that's, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is. You know, at the end of the day, people love those comparisons they can make. So I think that's just another one that's not going away anytime soon. This is a good question. Is Corey Mace the best coach in the CFL?
maybe. I it's hard to discredit what he's done, right? I mean, let's face it, Saskatchewan, he comes in, the team was kind of not really in the best of shapes when he took over. Um, Man, it's hard to say no, but it's hard to say yes too when you have Winnipeg, you know, they have the stability of it, Toronto, and the head coaching there. I mean, I know Toronto's off to a rough start, but I'm going to say no, but I think he's very close. I'm going to say no. As long as O'Shea's still up there, I think he's going to be second fiddle to O'Shea. Oh, I think we lost Sam, so it looks like he's frozen and has just let me know that his computer just randomly restarted on him. So I don't even know if I'm going to be able to stay on. I don't know if it moves me over to host or not, but I'll try to my best to fill as much as I can in this situation. But Frederick, anyways, back to your question here, as far as the best of the head coaches, Corey Mace. Like, I can't say that I don't think he's one of the best current in the league. And, you know, like I mentioned before, I was going to try to get Sam's thoughts on it. But I think as long as Mike O'Shea is there as far as the head coach of Winnipeg, I think that it kind of has to go to him until Winnipeg starts kind of going on this losing trend. I know that they didn't, you know, win the. I think we got Sam back in some capacity. There he is. He's back. I was just saying, Sam, I don't know how much you caught before your computer decided to restart on you there or whatever. But I was saying that I think that Corey Mace is amongst the top, and I think that he has to be in the discussion. But I feel like as long as Mike O'Shea is the head coach at Winnipeg, that it has to go to him, in my opinion. So I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but that's where I was when when all of a sudden you just poofed out of thin air.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not really sure what happened, but all of a sudden my computer was just like, "Hey, we need to restart. You had a fatal error." So that'll be fun to figure out a little bit later here today. So I apologize. I am currently on my phone trying to get the computer back up, but um, such is life when you're live streaming, right? So I'm not sure why, but it looks like our audience kind of cratered when I popped off of there, but no big deal. Corey Mace is a great coach. I'm not prepared to say that he is the best head coach in the NFL or the CFL. I apologize. I personally think that he is definitely one of the best coaches in
Yeah.
the league. But I think if I had to pick anybody in particular, it's probably going to Ryan Dinwiddie in Toronto or Jason
Dinwiddie.
Moss in Montreal. Um, well, man, I say that, but then I'm not giving any credit to Winnipeg either. So that's another one. So I mean, really, at the end of the day, there's some really good coaching in the CFL, and specifically with those four teams. So I think Corey Mace is definitely trending toward, being one of the best coaches in the CFL. I mean, you can't argue with his track record so far in a very short amount of time. But at the same time, I don't think I'm prepared to say that he is the best coach in the CFL currently. So, we'll see. He's very young in his head coaching career, so I think there's plenty of time for him to lay claim to that spot.
I mean, the fact that we're even having him in the discussion with the guys like Ryan Dinwiddie and Mike O'Shea and Moss up there in Montreal is incredible, anyways. From that standpoint, for me, I just think with Winnipeg, I know Toronto's off to a rough start with Dinwiddie, but with Winnipeg, it's been the beacon, it's been the staple of success and consistency for the last few years, as has Ryan Dinwiddie. So, I mean, really, honestly, either one of those two you could probably pick, and I probably wouldn't argue with you. I think Mace is close, though. I think it shows a lot that he's young in his head coaching career, and we're already having this discussion. So, you're on mute there, Sam. Just want to let you know.
Sorry about that. No, I would agree. I think that, like you said, he's definitely trending that direction, and it's encouraging that he's been able to garner enough recognition to be named as one of the top coaches this early in his career. But like I said, you can't argue with his results, and this season, I think Saskatchewan has started off hot, and I don't think anything negative should go against him in particular based on the Calgary loss. I think Calgary is just a really good team right now, and you can't necessarily discount Saskatchewan and what they've been able to do so far based on that one game either. So, not saying that's what anybody is doing, but at the end of the day, you definitely have to give Corey Mace his flowers for what he's been able to do.
Yeah, for sure. And Frederick also had another question for us too. I got kind of buried there. It's right here. He said, "What is one of the biggest moves the CFL could make to boost their fans as well as their income?" Now, you and I have had a couple discussions about what they possibly could do here. Um, what are your thoughts on that from that standpoint? I don't know how easy it was for you to get to it on your phone, so I figured I'd just do it for you. But what are your thoughts on that from that standpoint? Because for me, I have a couple ideas, but honestly, they're probably not really flashy.
That's part of it. That's part of it for sure. And I think, as much as I hate to say it, we talk about it a lot, right? Attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So what do you need to do? I think you need to focus very heavily on making sure that, every big play, every one-handed catch, every, you know, uh, 50 plus yard passing play or kick return or punt return or whatever it may be that is really just an exciting play needs to be plastered all over social media as much as you can possibly get it out there. um, you know Honestly, it sounds crazy, but maybe they need to go to the extent of utilizing platforms like, and I'm probably going to catch some flack for saying this out loud, but like Discord and Reddit and Facebook and all these platforms where I don't want to say that sports teams neglect them because obviously CFL has a Facebook page and all of that stuff, but they don't really utilize them in the manner that they could, right? So I think if you took a little bit of time and really kind of dug into some of the platforms that are out there for them to be able to share their content and stuff like that on, I think there are casual fans out there you can catch and make into CFL fans. But I think the thought process that overnight any of this stuff is going to blow up is just it's not realistic, unfortunately. The CFL has been around for forever, literally longer than the NFL. So I mean, they're fighting an uphill battle where the NFL has captured people's attentions, and until that changes, I don't think that they're really going to gain a groundswell of support at any one time.
I think their growth is going to come from making sure that they're highlighting their superstars inside the league, and they're very active on X. they're one of the more active leagues on X and Instagram. And then after that, it kind of falters.
Yep.
Like their social media kind of disappears. Like I'll be on, I could go on TikTok and I could see an IFL game or highlight more than I'm going to see a CFL one. And I follow them both. You know what I mean? And then Blue Sky is an untapped resource. IFL is already on there. CFL is not. So it's there's so many resources that the CFL could jump on from a social media standpoint to be able to get their product out there, to really focus on stuff like you said, like as far as Facebook, Reddit, Discord. Like they're not utilizing those in the same manner as some of the other leagues, and I think that that's going to be something that they're going to need to look into moving forward, because there is some untapped things. But for me, my biggest thing is honestly not changing too much than what they're doing now. Obviously, social media needs the biggest thing, but they present themselves as a big league. You don't hear the announcers talking about how this guy wants to go to the NFL, or this guy's been in the NFL, or you very rarely hear anything about the NFL unless it's just talking about somebody playing for a team. Right? You don't hear about what they did in the NFL. They don't harp on it. This isn't a guy who went for 8 yards and 8 catches for 104 yards against it. They do a good job of making sure that they're not inadvertently highlighting the NFL and comparing themselves to the NFL on broadcasts. Right? That's one of the biggest things that CFL does. It's great. As long as they continue doing that and working with CBS, because I think they're getting a good amount of exposure from CBS. One of the other things I do wish that they would do, though, is market here in America that CFL games are free for us if they're not on CBS. You can just, it's an internet thing, but it's free for us. So I would like to see them actually develop a CFL app, a CFL Plus app. So that way it's an easy click. So you're not you're not doing it through the website. That can be used for America and Canadians. If Canadians for the most part get all the games on TSN anyways, but for Americans or other parts of North America, so it's just an easy download. Boom, boom, boom. Wash your hands, and there you go. You can watch the games. I think that would be the next step
I
for
think
them.
that's a great suggestion, and I think that's probably something that's in the works already. And if it's not, I think that's a failure of leadership, honestly, because this is an application-driven world at this point. So I mean, if you could have a CFL app on your phone at the click of a button, and you could go in there and look up stats of the players and watch all the games and stuff like that. I think that would be huge, especially if they built in like the CFL fantasy football leagues as well, and just made it one all encompassing app, that's basically a reflection of the website as well. I think that would probably go a long way, and drawing in a few fans here and there to watch the games. So I think that was a really good suggestion on your part, and I think that's a good way for them to continue growing the game, long term, because other than stuff like that, I mean, I'm not really sure what you can do. And actually, one of the subjects we were going to discuss today is that they just recently partnered with a gambling service. So I mean, they've already leaned into gambling. They already have fantasy football. It's not like they're lacking any of the things that draw in um, the real football nerds like us, that want to really get involved in ways like playing fantasy sports and gambling on the games and stuff like that. So I think they've definitely utilized some of the more mainstream things, but no, I think an app would go a long way. And then also I think there's some room for growth in their social media strategy. So I liked what, and not to get too far off on a tangent here, but I liked what Bobby Dvorsny, sorry, said yesterday in our interview, on Around the Indoor Football World. And granted, that's another sport entirely, but he spoke about the fact that you have to stay with the times. So whatever platform or social media outlet is really kind of the hot thing at that moment, the league should be on there and they should be utilizing it heavily and trying to get in front of the new the youngest possible market to get their product out there. So I think there's some ways that they can kind of adapt and grow long term, but I don't think there's any one-stop shop to fix anything. Let's put it that way, or fix everything.
I will say it's also hard for them from a CFL perspective too, because Americans are, the comparing to the NFL, the Americans are very, I guess, snobbish in that front, where they're always comparing everything to the NFL when it comes to football related. Like the IFL, great, great, great league, great action, but it's indoor football, so Americans look at it and kind of turn their nose up to it. It's not the NFL. You talk about the LFA down in Mexico. Americans won't watch it because it's not the NFL. So I think the CFL has done a good job of making a little bit different of a football game, or a different adaptation of a football game, that they have to try to lean into that as much as possible, to be like, yeah, we're not the NFL. However, we have this, or we have that, or we have this type of, like bigger plays, or, that's one of the things that they do need to kind of tap into, right? Because it's one of the biggest issues for any sports league, or especially football league, is trying to find a way to grow that audience. And honestly, the CFL has seen growth. We've seen it in their attendance numbers have kind of crept up there the last few years, especially since coming out of COVID, like prior to COVID and stuff. Their CFL numbers are definitely creeped up there. And we saw the Saskatchewan made 2.4 million on a net last year. So that's already more positive news that we're seeing coming from there, from that perspective, than we've seen in the past. So I think CBS has done. I would like to see. I would like to see CBS advertise a little bit more for their CFL games. Like, I watch a fair amount of CBS Sports for soccer, and I don't really get a lot of CFL until like the game is like an hour and a half away. Then all of a sudden it's like tonight 4 p.m. and it's like, that's kind of where I would like to see a little bit more balance in their partnership. TSN's huge in Canada. Us Americans don't really know what that is. So like CBS needs to make sure they're leaning into it. Like, I'd like to see a Wednesday preview, for a Thursday game, instead of it being on Thursday type of situation.
No, that makes sense. And I think CBS Sports could benefit from kind of leaning into some of their alternative football content. We've talked about it. We talked about it last year a lot. Some things have changed since then, but last year you had the entire AFL playoff run. You had the IFL championship game. You had CFL. So at that point, like, why are we not spending a little bit more money to promote that we're going to be broadcasting these games for alternative football leagues? And you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of money on any one specific league, but like you said, you put out like an hour-long preview show on a Wednesday night, and you could even bundle everything together and talk, CFL half the show and IFL half the show, or whatever. And I know at this particular point you only have the IFL championship game, so we're kind of looking at I guess a hypothetical situation. But if you really leaned into this, you become one of the main sources of alternative football content in mainstream media, and that could be a huge thing for you. Obviously there's very dedicated fans at this level, but unfortunately I still think I don't know what it's going to take to get back to that point, but I just don't think we're at that particular point in the CFL's popularity quite yet, even though CBS Sports is broadcasting the game. So it's kind of a bizarre situation all the way around. It's like CBS wants the content, but they don't necessarily want to invest a ton of money in promoting the content, which is just honestly just silly. At the end of the day, like, you have these games that are exciting, they're compelling. It's a smaller league, so fans are going to be able to understand and learn the teams quicker and stuff like that. So I think if you leaned into that, you'd be better off. The league would be better off. But maybe that's a conversation that the CFL needs to have, as this partnership with CBS Sports continues.
Everything I've seen, pretty solid numbers for the CFL and CBS too. pretty solid numbers across the board. So there is an appeal for it. People uh, are tuning in. It's not NFL type numbers, because once again we got to stop comparing everything to the NFL. But there's a market for it, and I'd like to see a little bit more from the CBS side of things, and hopefully the CFL can work that out and whatnot. It sounds like, from what I've gathered, because of the lack of the CBS um, mention on the TSN network, it sounds like it's just an agreement that the CBS airs the TSN broadcast. Um, so maybe they need to find a way to balance the both of that out to get from both their ends. Because I don't ever hear Glenn Suter say anything about CBS Sports. So maybe they both need to get together and kind of iron that out a little bit, and just kind of give each other, that little bit of mutual thing. I know CBS Sports may not necessarily operate in Canada on the same level, but it's not going to hurt to at least mention CBS Sports as the United States broadcast partner.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, realistically, if that's the agreement and they're running just the TSN broadcast on CBS Sports, I understand the logistics of that. Obviously, you're getting free content, or not free content, but you're getting easy content for CBS Sports, and quality content at that, as far as that goes. So it makes a lot of sense to just kind of set it and forget it. But at the same time, if you're seeing encouraging numbers and you're not putting any effort into promoting that product, you might want to wonder and kind of look into some of the projections of what it might look like if you did promote it. And I think that would probably be worthwhile for CBS Sports, because, like I said, last year they were kind of the leader in mainstream media coverage of alternative football, and I think that's a market to tap. We have a whole network built on that. And obviously we're not CBS Sports, but at the same time there is interest for this stuff. We prove that. So I think that's definitely an untapped market for CBS Sports, and maybe it's something that we see them grow over time. But currently, I think there's a lot they're lacking a little bit of effort on that side for sure.
Yep.
But to transition from that topic, and thank you, Fred, for the comment, or the comments and the questions. Honestly, there weren't a ton of subjects to discuss today, so I'm glad that we're getting in some good ones. So the next subject to discuss that I just caught this morning, so strictly reading what we've got here. Don't know too much about TunyBet yet, but the CFL now has a betting partner, and it is Soft2Bet's subsidiary called TunyBet. It's a premier sports and online casino brand tailored for Canadian players. So that's awesome. That's a huge step for the CFL, and I think it's one thing that's going to continue to grow the game in Canada as well. So, any thoughts on this? I know there isn't really much to unpack here, but
I mean, I think it's great from the Canadian perspective, because it sounds like this particular casino, sports book and betting partner is a Canadian, um, you know, uh, sports book, and they have it looks like one of the largest followings up there, which is great for them. They're already on DraftKings and Caesars down here, so you can bet on them there. But they're not. That's the other thing that I wish that they would kind of do is, I think that the betting circuit is kind of one of the biggest things to help the growth, because that's really where you get a lot of the interest in. If you can get people to bet on them, that's going to draw interest to the games. Like, they're going to want to pay attention to them a little bit more, and kind of pay attention to what the league is doing a little bit more. And having an official partner now, when you haven't had one, which is baffling to me, up there for the last few years, is going to be a huge step into helping the growth, I think, overall, with the sport, for sure. So, not a lot to unpack, no, but I think it's a very good strategic partnership, and I think it's going to, further draw, help the game up there and the league up there, with bringing attention to Canadians, for sure.
agreed. And Looking at some of the reviews and stuff on the platform, and it sounds like they're doing a pretty good job of running a pretty solid betting platform that people like to use. So I mean, that's always a positive. You want to be cognizant of the companies you're partnering with, because we've all seen sometimes it's not as cut and dry and as easy as we would like it to be, as far as just partnering with whoever's interested. So I think this is a quality partner, and I think this is something that's going to continue to help help them grow the game and interest in Canada, which is honestly probably their first concern, because as much as we like to call them the NFL of Canada, they don't have the market share in their own country that the NFL does here yet either. So realistically, if there's anything you want to take from this whole conversation and what we've been talking about so far in this episode, it's that the CFL is a great league already, but there's so much room for growth for them that we're really kind of just seeing them scratch the surface. And I think that the significant rise in the salary cap this past season was an indication of that.
Well, I think also part of it is if you have any discussion with a CFL fan, like a majority of their fan base is like CFL purists, right? Like they any type of suggestion of possibly changing the game a little bit is usually met with about hundreds of attacks against you of some capacity. I'd like to see that kind of gatekeeping kind of disappear too from the CFL fan base, because that's never going to help a casual fan like get into it. Like explain to them why the rule is that way, instead of if they say, oh, this rule's stupid, it should be changed, like explain it to them. Don't just attack them, type of thing, because you're not helping the growth of the game by doing that either. But the CFL kind of has this purist, like, they're very old school in their way. Like, well, we've existed for 104 years. Like, we've done this before, like, type of thing. And it's like, yeah, but you still want to continue to grow. So you need to find the alternative ways to do it. And I think that just recently we're starting to see them kind of accept a little bit of like the, changing times, and like, okay, maybe this is a good idea, we need to do this, and let's test the waters, but we don't want to dive all the way in just yet, type of thing. So it's getting there. They're definitely moving in the right direction. It's just they're moving at a much slower pace than most other people would, and that may not be a bad thing though either. So
that's fair for sure. Slow and sustained growth is not a bad thing either. So, I mean, there is a case to be made there. Moving on, though, we're going to hit a quick commercial. We'll be right back, and then we will discuss some more things. There's quite a bit left to talk about in this episode, but we are probably got about 3 or 4 subjects left. A couple of them are going to just be nice and quick, but then we have one main one that I want to get to. So we'll be right back.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school.
Oh, wow.
This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I used to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right, we are back, and the subject that we were going to discuss next is the neg lists are finally 100% public to fans, and I think this is one of those moves that, we've been talking a lot about the marketing and the media side of things with the CFL, and I think this is one of those things that they can really capitalize going forward. But you had some specific thoughts on the list, so I'll let you go ahead and take us away, and I'll pull up some of the lists here for us, and we can have that visual.
Yeah, so a majority of when I was looking at the list here, one of the biggest things that I think I noticed was while some of the names that are on the list are definitely just to kind of like draw attention to the league type of situation, like Shador Sanders' name being on there, stuff like that. Like it's just basically kind of an attention grabber at this point. And I'm not saying that Shador doesn't necessarily at some point in time in his career negotiate with somebody, but it's definitely everything that happened with him dropping in the NFL draft and everything. It was kind of like a like go getter attention grabber. And I'm sure that these neg lists in the past have definitely had certain type of quarterbacks on there that have been very similar. But now when I'm looking at these lists from a quarterback perspective, it looks like there's some strategic actual reasons for some of the names that are on this list. And it also makes me wonder if some of these teams are starting to realize that, hey, we have an older branch of quarterback in the league right now. We need to start growing some of these guys. Let's try to tackle guys a little bit younger. Like right now, just this list that you have up right here, I see Noah Fifita's name. He's currently in college. He's a high-profile guy who has the ability to be an NFL quarterback, but he's small. He's not very big at all. And his size is going to probably hinder him at becoming anything in the NFL. So it's smart to put him on here saying, hey, if it doesn't work out, you can come and your game fits what we do up here. Your height doesn't need to be as big of an issue. It doesn't as like the NFL does. You go a little further down this list. I think this is the same team. I think it's BC. Damon Williams is on there. Damon Williams is a sophomore currently in college. He's a redshirt sophomore up at Washington. The fact that he's already on this list tells me that they're looking at it going, okay, this guy could be a guy of the future. Chris Oladukin, we know a little bit about. DJ Montez is a guy who was an FCS guy who just transferred up to the FBS. A couple spots ahead of him, John Mateer. John Mateer is a sophomore, true sophomore, lit up Washington State last year. He's at Oklahoma now. So it feels like they're a little bit more strategic with how they're going about it, saying, hey, we're going to put some names on here that are going to draw attention, but some of these other quarterbacks are quarterbacks that are like successful at the college level and in a situation where they may not necessarily make it to the NFL. If we can get to them early enough and draw their attention to our league, maybe we'll be appealing enough that they can come up here, sit for a couple of years, and grow into the Trevor Harrises of the world, the McLeod Bethel Thompsons of the world, things of that nature. And I don't really want to say that it's necessarily the reliancy of in the past of quarterbacks that aren't from a D1 level. It feels like that a lot of these negotiation lists, I was comparing it to the 2022 list, and it feels like a lot of these negotiation lists over the last few years have started kind of going bigger into the FBS pool compared to the past. Like a lot of the past ones were like, in 2022, there was a lot of like D3 schools and D2 schools and FCS schools, which isn't a problem. That's not a problem at all because there's talent there. It just feels like the CFL is starting to realize like maybe we can tap into some of this FBS guys, get some of these names that people know a little bit more that watch college football and get them to come up north, and that will bring eyes with them, And I think that's smart. And it may not be even the CFL's doing. It could just be the team and ownership's doing from that perspective. But like Garrett Green was a preseason Heisman watch candidate last year at West Virginia. He's not drafted. He's not with them anymore. But Musa Muhammad, he was with the Carolina Panthers just recently. His dad is Mushin Muhammad. So yeah, simple stuff like that. And I think that that's good for the CFL across the board because I think that that's something that the CFL, hopefully, if these teams can get to them early enough, can hopefully bring that attention up north. And I'm sure the CFL has a lot to do with it as well. There's some names on here that are kind of like long shots per se. Like Trey Lance is on this list, Shador Sanders is on this list, but I think that's just more of an eye grabbing. Well, I'll be honest with you, Trey Lance may actually want to think about it. But just from a quarterback perspective, that's how I feel. And I don't know if anybody else has really gotten that vibe or not, but it feels like that they're some of them are attention grabbers, but for the most part, it looks like there's a good amount of strategic planning behind that. To hopefully maybe draw some of those younger guys to come up north if they don't make it to the NFL.
No, I would agree. And, I think in years past, a lot more of it has been posturing because you only put out certain names. So, they're trying to pick and choose which names are really going to create a buzz. And I actually had this discussion with somebody on Twitter recently that some of these names, like you said, are just attention grabbers. They're just there for PR. And I know that a lot of people are going to sit there and say a front office of a football team is not going to pick players for a negotiation list based on PR. And I wholeheartedly say not only will they, but they understand the value of what they're doing in the process. So I understand that, some people are going to sit here and have some doubts about that, but you have to look at the players they're choosing, right? I think the end of it is that how do I even want to word this? Basically, the most important part is they're picking guys that are realistic, right? Shedeur Sanders, as much as I don't think he'll ever end up in the CFL, he was a 5th-round pick. He
Right.
slipped in the draft, and honestly, there was no telling exactly where he was going to end up at one point. There was some discussion that he might not even sign with any team and go undrafted. And honestly, looking back in hindsight, I understand why they did that because there was an off chance that maybe he chose to really push the issue, tell every NFL team he was not going to sign, and then either went back to college because he still had eligibility to do that, or he went to another league and played for one season professionally and then went back into the draft process for the NFL, which is 100% legal to do. So I guess in that perspective, I think there was some realistic chance that Shedeur Sanders could potentially go to the CFL at one point, but also the name value. You might be taking a chance that guy never comes to play, but at the same point, like you said, you're drawing attention by putting specific names on the list. A guy like Kellen Mond, Alex Magoo, Shedeur Sanders, Ben DiNucci, sorry. Players that have some NFL experience or were an NFL draft pick at one point, Trey Lance, but at the end of the day are not 100% counted out from coming to the league. If you just start throwing people on there like Tom Brady and, Aaron Rodgers and stuff like that, then, people are just going to lose interest. But it seems like so far teams are using this strategically, both for the media benefits and then also for the benefits of potentially bringing in high-level players and preventing them from signing other places. But through that whole little spiel I just gave, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, and this is something that I've never really asked anybody, so if you dismiss it, I won't blame you at all. But do you think that the neg list works negatively in some instances, preventing players from signing with specific teams? Like, or for instance, like, if you're a player and right now you're signed to, or you're on the Ottawa Red Blacks negotiation list, are you looking at it like, maybe I don't want to go there because they're not too good? Or do you think that at the end of the day, them being on the neg list makes them more likely to sign with a CFL team?
I think it depends on the player. I think the player, if it's a guy who thinks that he has a legitimate shot in the NFL still, or a guy who, is his only dedication to his entire career is to make it to the NFL. I think that if they look at a team like Ottawa and go, well, if I go up there and they're 1-7, like I don't know if I really want to negotiate with them. Because like what good is it going to do for me in my career? You take a look at a guy like Shedeur Sanders, who, by the way, Shedeur being on the neg list was 100% a publicity thing because not because the CFL the CFL knew what they were doing, or at least whoever it was, I can't remember which team it was that put him on the neg list, but he was the hot name in in the sports world at that time, because he had fallen to the 5th round. There was a lot of rumors and talks about why he fell to the 5th. He was in the media, and as soon as he was on that neg list and it was revealed he was on the neg list, every major media outlet in America put out some kind of article that he was on the list. There was some kind of mention on it in some capacity on social media that he was on a neg list. So smart move by that team, and also brought eyes to the CFL from that standpoint. Now, as far as it being a negative thing, I think it just depends on the player. I think you have to take it on an individual case-by-case basis, if it's somebody who's just genuinely wants to create and continue their playing career because they love football, losing sucks. But for any true athlete, they know that losing is part of the game. And it's somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. You're playing games 1-on-1. It's not 4-on-4. It's not 4 teams playing each other all at once, where you might be able to finish second or third. So I think real players that just want to play for the love of the game won't care as much. And some of them may just want to be looking to continue their career playing football. And the win-loss thing, you take a look at Calgary, the last few years have been kind of crap. Now this year they're winning. So, maybe you're that guy that helps turn that around. It can be a double-edged sword, sure, because I think like anything in life, it can be negative and positive, but I think it does more positive than negative, because it gives another option for some of these players that may not have very many options left.
That's
like
fair.
like a Trey Lance.
That's fair, for sure. And I think honestly, a player like Trey Lance really would do the league and himself a lot of favors by coming and playing in the league. But I wrote a whole article about that. It's on Alt Football Digest. You can go read it more if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that. But some of the names on this list are very interesting as well, because like you said, that they're probably primarily attention grabbers as well. Like Diego Pavia, didn't he just retire medically?
Diego Pavia did not retire medically. He was the one that challenged the NCAA about JUCO transfers and JUCO
Thank you. My bad.
Not being part of their eligibility, and won. Basically, he's got another year at Vanderbilt, but his name drew big because Vanderbilt beat Alabama last year, and he's been very open and very he's been very open and very vocal on social media about stuff. Another guy that's similar to that's Matthew Sluka, right there underneath Shadur, at James Madison. UNLV left UNLV because supposedly NIL obligations weren't met. Rumors were that it was because he felt he was worth more than what UNLV was paying him, and then he wanted to step up in competition, and then ended up at James Madison, where he's got a year of eligibility left. So some of these names are definitely guys that have been catching headlines lately, and they're thrown on there. Now, whether or not it's done because the CFL understands that they've probably burned bridges, or it is attention based. Like, let's draw eyes on there. But you could pretty much find 1 or 2 attention grabbing names on almost every single one of these lists. So it's not really that surprising to see that per se. So
That's fair. And my fault. I was thinking, I'm blanking his name now, but the kid from New Mexico who's played college football for like 12 years now.
I mean, Diego Pavia played at New Mexico State before he transferred to Vanderbilt.
I'm blanking the kid's name. I don't watch a lot of college football, so obviously, as you know, I'm not the greatest when it comes to talking about anything college related, but I'm just completely blanking his name at the moment.
Yeah.
There are some interesting names on here for me personally, but we won't go delve into too much of that. There's a couple players on here that I talked to or have talked to recently that I'm excited to see their names on the list, because it means things they're trending up for them, and hopefully they both end up in there. So excited to see that as well. But a couple transactions moves, nothing real big. We're not going to spend a lot of time on any of this stuff, but this past couple weeks, we've seen some rather interesting moves. The Montreal Alouettes made a couple of moves. They signed linebacker Caleb Johnson, who was previously with the Arlington Renegades of the UFL this season. I heard
I
a
think he
little
was on
while
that
ago.
neg list too. Not to cut you off, I think I saw his name on the neg list too.
I will have to go back and look
He's
at
a
that.
linebacker, right?
Yeah.
I think he's under Montreal's neg list.
Let me look at that because I did not catch that. But yeah. Anyway, it sounded like he was jumping ship from the UFL, wanted to join the CFL just to continue playing, finish out the season with them. And then at one point, it sounded like there was a hang up in the UFL league office in terms of him getting granted his release. So I'm not sure if he's up there playing yet. I do think he ultimately will end up with the Alouettes one way or another. But as of right now, I think there was a slight hang up. And you're right. He is on there. Caleb Johnson from Miami. So yeah, look, Montreal, we've always want to talk about how these neg lists are a crapshoot, but there's already players being signed off of them before they were even, I think before they were even published. And then also Alouettes signed wide receiver Alexander Hollins. That is kind of the bigger move of these lists, or this list of transactions.
Who signed him? Sorry.
Montreal.
Montreal, okay, yeah.
Any thoughts about that and how he'll fit with Montreal before I move on to the couple other?
I mean, Montreal definitely needs. I mean, they don't need anything per se, really, because they're one of the best teams in the league. But anytime you can get a guy who can come in and kind of be a little bit of a difference maker at key points, it's important. And I think Alexander Hollins does that. I was a little bit surprised that he was a free agent. Like, he's not a guy who is going to, be your true wide receiver one and dominate games, but he's pretty clutch. He comes up in key moments. Like, he did it for BC for a lot of years where, they needed a second down conversion, and he runs an 8-yard out and turns it into a 9-yard gain for a first down. So it's going to be interesting to see how he fits with that wide receiving room, but I think it's a solid presence in the locker room and veteran presence that you can trust.
I agree. And honestly, to be quite frank, it's surprising he was still available at this point. When he was first released, I thought he was going to end up being somebody who latched on a team quick. But here we are, and the Alouettes, the rich get richer. They just continue to bring in quality players, and I think Caleb Johnson and Alexander Hollins are great indications of that. So, I mean, I think that if you're an Alouettes fan, you have to be encouraged by these moves because it means they're not satisfied, even though they're one of the top teams in the league. So that's always encouraging when you're a fan. They obviously have Grey Cup aspirations this season. Moving on to a couple other moves. Hamilton released former second-round pick Siramin Bagayogo. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. The Lions signed offensive lineman Hunter Stewart, which I believe is a pretty big move for them, and defensive back Cameron Stone. And that kind of rounds out the major news from the transactions this past couple weeks. One thing that we have not talked about because we did not do an episode last week was the brawl after the Montreal and BC game. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it. I think that's been talked about ad nauseum at this point. But were you at all surprised to see the brawl between the two teams? And then also, does it even remotely surprise you to see that Kamiko Ture caught a 1-game suspension due to this?
No, not at all. You also mentioned, I think, off in one of the chats that BC has been part of 3 brawls already, or 3 fights of some capacity this year. Somebody mentioned that to you, and you relayed it to us. I think it was from 3 Down Nation, so shout out to 3 Down Nation by all means. Not trying to take credit for that reporting at all, but BC, it's not a surprise there's a suspension. I think the CFL needs to step in and do something with the organization, though. That organization needs to be fined in some capacity or something, because 3 fights / brawls in week 6, week 7 is unacceptable from any level. I know that when brawls happen in the indoor and arena league, usually the leagues are very swift to act. So the CFL needs to do something in some capacity here. A 1-game suspension for Ture is fine and dandy and all, but what's the message being sent to the team? It's not really being sent to the team anything of any sort. So I think that they need to definitely 100% step in and kind of find this organization, hit them where it hurts in their wallet a little bit, and maybe it will send the right message to the Lions, because what's going to happen if there's another fight next? You suspend one of their players for 2 games, what would be freaking do? Like you got to hit them. You got to send a message quick and early, especially considering there's already been 3 fights. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a season where you have 18 games, what message does 1 game suspension really send after the brawl like this? And I know that, like I said, 3 Down Nation came up with that stat where BC has been in 3 fights, and they laid it out very, very clearly that these situations continue to happen with BC. And I mean, I think you said it best, is if you continue to have issues with one specific team from the league's perspective, you have to find that team. You have to send a message that at the end of the day, this is on the coaches, the front office, the organization as a whole, to clean up the issues inside their team. Because right now, whatever it is, discipline is not very high on the list for BC. And, that's a first-time head coach out there with Buck Pierce taking over for Rick Campbell. So he needs to get this under control really quickly before things, before he loses the locker room. And really, you kind of have to wonder if we're not already trending that direction so quickly in his tenure with BC. And if that's the case, then you really have to sit back and wonder if BC made the right decision to move on from Rick Campbell.
Yeah, and that's honestly where the CFL needs to step in, to just say, hey, like, these weren't issues before. Why are they issues suddenly now? And I get playing with passion as a former player myself, and you play with a lot of passion, you play with a lot of determination, a lot of grit, and you really want to, send an aggressive message when you're on the field. But once that whistle blows and the clock is 00 at 4 on the 4th quarter, it's, hey, good game, we'll get you next time, or hey, you put up a hell of a fight. It's not let's go brawl type of thing. And that's how my coaching staff has always, taught me, and taught my team, is like, if you get angry, take it out within the confines of the rules of the game. Don't take it out after the game. Don't take it out where you're going to put us in harm's way. And it sounds like BC doesn't have that message with whatever this coaching staff is, and it goes on the coaching staff. Let's be honest. I mean, the players know better, sure, but it's on the coaching staff, because they're encouraging certain type of behaviors in practices or behind the scenes that normally shouldn't be encouraged. And that's where we're coming from this standpoint. Sometimes players are just hotheads, but like 3 fights in a matter of a 7-week or 6-week window is that's on the coaching staff, in my opinion.
100%. And to take this one step further, BC has been incredibly undisciplined on the field as well. When you talk about they're by and far away from every other team when it comes to turnovers made. They've committed 15 turnovers already this season. So they're really just there's a lot of decision-making questions when it surrounds BC. They're also one of the heaviest penalized teams in the league. So, I mean, obviously these things aren't directly correlated, but you have to wonder if this is not a bigger problem within the organization, like you said, and this isn't what they're either being taught to do or not being taught not to do. And regardless, one way or another, that's on the coaching staff. So I think this is a big issue that needs to be addressed in BC. 3 fights, 4 players already fined or suspended in such a short season. That's not a good look for the league. It's not a good look for BC, and it's something that definitely needs to be corrected moving forward. But don't want to spend a ton of time on that. Everybody else has beat that fight to death, over the past couple of weeks. And actually, there's one more question I want to ask you real quick, just based on that I think was kind of an interesting point. But while listening to 3 Down Nation and they were discussing all the details around the fight and stuff like that, I believe it was John Hodge actually said that he thinks that the fight might actually serve to be a positive thing for the league due to the media to draw fans in. You know, a lot of fans are seeing this everywhere, and maybe some fans are going to watch the games because of a brawl rather than being turned off by it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, all news is good news. You know, as much as I hate to say that, because negative news is never fun to hear, but when you have stuff like that, it's that type of news is definitely more of a positive indicator than, let's say, like a team folding, right? Like we discussed this numerous times about teams in the middle of leagues that, you know, fold or struggling financially or whatever. That deters football fans more than fights, because fights are showing passion, right? These players are passionate. You know, I mean, sure, it's not the best look, but fans don't really care when it comes to that type particular thing. They care more about what isn't a good look is when you have financial troubles or you have instability, right, amongst the league from the top down. This particular fight is going to draw attention. It's going to be in the headlines, and people are going to go, "Oh, them boys up there are really playing football with some passion. Let's go check that out and see if there's anything else that we can kind of draw on," right? So, yeah, it can be spun into a positive. I don't like seeing it, but I get it.
Fair point for sure. I mean, there isn't really much to unpack there or really think about, you know, as far as that goes. I mean, it either is or isn't, and it definitely has served to draw in some fans for sure. So, I mean, is it a good look? No. At the end of the day, anything that gets the CFL talked about in mainstream media is probably not the worst thing. So, I mean, I guess I kind of understand the thought process there, but it's one of those things, I guess. But the last topic of today, you know, we'll save the Red Blacks talk till next week, but I wanted to get your thoughts on Brandon Banks' comments on Tre Ford. He kind of went on, I don't want to say like a tirade by any stretch, but he was very heavily um, uh, he was very heavily criticizing Tre Ford and the league's insistence on making Tre Ford a focus of their marketing efforts. And I'll bring up his Twitter page so we can all kind of see the comments together here. But basically, he was saying that Tre Ford is nothing more than a good backup quarterback and not the player that we all want him to be. So, you know, we've talked about Tre Ford a lot on this show, you know, and I'm talking about, you know, all the way back to, you know, the beginning of his career, basically at this point. But what are your thoughts on this overall? Is he somebody that hasn't been given the opportunity yet to prove that he can be a franchise quarterback, and we're seeing him learn on the job? Or do you believe that he is showing us so far in his career that he is going to end up being a career backup?
So, here's the thing with Tre Ford. Now, you and I discussed this last year. We talked a little bit about it, and we were hearing, I don't remember who it was that mentioned it. I think it was like a former player or somebody had told me or mentioned it in a conversation with me when they were up in Edmonton's camp, that one of the biggest things that Tre lacked was his ability to read defenses, and his lack of film training. Like, he didn't understand what he was looking at when he was under center, and that was one of the things that deterred Chris Jones when Jones was up there from playing him. Chris Jones took a lot of slack because, you know, Chris Jones was, you know, not the guy, obviously, in Edmonton, but Tre was in a situation where he didn't understand the game. So basically, is what it boils down to from this former player, or this player that was formerly with Edmonton. and we discussed it last year a little bit when he was in the game. Like, you see the flashes of what everybody wants Tre Ford to be, but then you see some really, really stupid decisions. And I think that that's kind of been hand in hand this year. But you take a look at Edmonton's offense, and Edmonton's offense is better with Tre Ford under center. So while he may not necessarily be a franchise guy like Brandon Banks is saying, there's no doubt that the team is offensively more efficient, I guess, with him under center than what we saw with MBT last year.
Agreed.
Right? Like Tre Ford's athleticism and his talent alone as a football player is definitely unparalleled. Like, it's definitely something that fits the CFL game. It fits the way the CFL is. And he can be dynamic with the ball in his hands. But you know what it reminds me of is Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was dynamic with the ball in his hands, but he was not a good quarterback. He was not a guy who could be a franchise quarterback. Now, I know he won playoff games and he was fairly successful as a starter and blah, 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 but most of that wasn't because of his quarterback play. I mean, in that playoff game that everybody turns to, he was 10 of 24.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you know what I
everybody just
mean?
remembers that one big pass to Demarius Thomas.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
100%.
so, and you're the Denver fan. I mean, you're in Colorado. You're not the Denver fan, but you're in Colorado, so you know that's one of the biggest things.
Yes.
So, like, it's like they hold on to certain plays, and Tre Ford is kind of strikes me as that. Now, I think Tim Tebow was a smarter player than Tre Ford is as far as from the quarterback position is concerned, because Tebow actually, studied. He relied so much on his athleticism because he never needed to do any more. And I think that's what's happening with Tre. And I think the coaching staff now is basically like, we've tried with you. You're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. So go out there. And Tre's kind of rested on his laurels and his athleticism and his talent instead of actually trying to necessarily improve. Now, again, we're not behind the scenes, so we can only go based off what we see on the field every week. And about 80% of me agrees with Brandon Banks, like that he's not a franchise guy. There's a 20% there because you just never know. Somebody might surprise you, but I think his athleticism and his talent goes. It's very rare to see that blend at a quarterback position that's not starting on the field already. So I think there's room for growth. It's just, I don't know if we've already hit his ceiling or not. And that's why I say about 80% agree with Banks.
I think that's a good point. And I know a lot of people who are watching right now are probably going to turn around and point at the game this past couple weeks against Ottawa, where Tre Ford went 15 of 17 for 212 yards and I believe 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the day. Great game.
Great game.
For sure. But, there's a little bit of context in there that's always going to be lost kind of in the box score, so to speak. And he had 2 passing plays that added up to 91 total yards. So when you take that away, suddenly he was 13 of 15 for a little over 100 yards, 120 yards.
Against a banged up secondary.
Yeah. And actually, that also would have taken away one of his touchdowns too. So that's not exactly an impressive stat line. I think that it's proof that you can win with Tre Ford, especially if you game plan correctly. But I think right now what we're seeing is the classic sink or swim scenario. Edmonton knows that they've invested 4 years at this point in Tre Ford's development. They spent the first overall pick on him, and short of just letting him go to another team and figuring it out somewhere else, they had no choice. They had to turn to Tre Ford and give him a season to figure it out. Otherwise, it would be a forever a what if. And at this point, with who they've got on the roster, not saying Cody Fajardo is a bad quarterback by any stretch, but he's not exactly, in my opinion, the picture of an elite quarterback at the CFL level either. I mean, the dude won a Grey Cup, yeah, but he did so throwing 14 touchdowns and 14 interceptions in that season. So, he's a great game manager, but I think if you have a potential or a player like Tre Ford who's got the potential, the athleticism, all the physical traits that you just can't teach, you have to give that guy a chance to figure it out or flop. And I think that's right where we're at right now. And let's be honest, we see this with every mobile quarterback that comes out that's just got elite athleticism. They always are quick to run. They always rely on their feet more than anything, and it's just bound to happen, right? So I mean, I think at this point, it's just a matter of seeing if Tre Ford can really kind of grow and adapt into a player that can do a lot of damage from the pocket, but run when needed. And that's a transition I feel we see more often than not with athletic quarterbacks. So while he is catching a lot of flack, and I think a lot of it's warranted at this point in his career, I think he's catching a lot more flack than he maybe would if it weren't for the fact that he was a first overall pick. And like Banks is saying here, the league is actively trying to make him the face of the league to really get themselves out there. And I'm kind of contradicting myself because we talked about it earlier. And you want to highlight those exciting plays. You want to show off your best players, your best quality athletes. And I would be lying to anybody if I sat here and said that I don't think Tre Ford should be out front with some of the stuff that he can do. But I think you're also doing him a disservice to a certain extent by putting undue pressure on him.
So I'm also going to play a little bit devil's advocate on this side too, and go with that. I don't blame all of it on Tre either. Making him the face and making him the future of this league, let's face it. I mean, that's basically what the CFL is trying to do, is they're trying to make him the future, and for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, he plays the quarterback position, which is like always the most high profile position. Secondly, he's a Canadian. He was a first overall pick to Edmonton, and he's dynamic as far as like the ball in his hands. He's a pretty dynamic player across the board. He's a hell of a football player. So I get wanting to make him the face of the league. However, Edmonton has been a beacon of instability. We talk about it a lot. Coaching staff, coaching style, overturn at a lot of different positions. Chris Jones didn't know what he was doing at the quarterback position forever. Like, it felt like he was bringing in 800 quarterbacks every year. And we talk numerous times about quarterback development at the NFL level and how it lacks because there's no patience. And at the CFL level, we feel like they're better with it. And part of that is because they don't really have much of a choice, right? They don't have much of a choice but to do it. However, a guy like Tre Ford has not had any favors done to him by the coaching staff at Edmonton in the instability in that front office with the Elks. Edmonton has been by far the most unstable franchise in the last 3 or 4 years that I can think of when it comes to player turnover, coaching turnover, play style, no direction, no consistency across the board. It's one thing that Chris Jones brought when he was the head coach, was a lot of inconsistency with his coaching style and his coaching prowess. And I don't think that's helped Tre Ford at all. Now, part of that is Tre Ford's fault, because at the same time, you need to do what you need to do to cross your T's and dot your I's and make sure you're putting the work in when you play the most high profile position in football. So I kind of get it from a league perspective, and I get that it's not all necessarily Tre Ford's fault. It's just at some point Tre has to flip that script and put the rest of everybody else on notice, and more so hold himself to a standard that, yes, I haven't gotten the stuff that I needed, but I can do better myself. And from the comments from the former, Edmonton player that was there in the locker room with Tre, it really honestly sounds like Tre isn't doing himself any justice. So we'll see what happens this week, because last week he had a good game. We'll see what happens this week or tonight. But yeah, I agree with you that it may be one of those sink or swim situations this year for him. And the CFLs might have to find somebody else to kind of latch onto to be the face here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. They obviously want a Canadian to lead the league and be the face of the league. But at the same time, I mean, this also is partially, I think, due to the fact that if you look across the league, the other quarterbacks, there really is no player that you could really put the league on his shoulders, right, and use him as the marketing beacon. Maybe Vernon Adams, maybe Nathan Rourke, and really Rourke, I think, would probably be the best bet there. But you look at
Davis Alexander, maybe.
Good point. Davis Alexander is doing pretty well.
At least for from a future perspective. Like immediately right now, Adams and Rourke would make more sense. But I think from a future perspective, you could make an argument for Davis Alexander.
Yeah, and now that you mention him, that might actually be the way to go, because that's one of those guys that you brought in. He had no NFL interest. He came straight to the CFL as a rookie, developed for a couple of years in Montreal system, and then turned into a quality starting quarterback. And I think that actually might be the way to go now that you mention him, because showing that facet of your league is going to help you get some talent, because the guys that slip through the cracks and aren't initially given that interest, a lot of them are either not playing or they're going to the UFL, where there are already established quarterbacks that are probably not leaving anytime soon. So that could be a good way for them to kind of draw in some of those guys that are from the smaller schools that have the physical ability to develop into a starter at least. So that's a good point. But I was actually going to say that Chad Kelly would probably be the first person they would choose. But due to everything off the field with him, you can't trot that guy out there as the face of the league. Yeah, that would be a colossal failure on everybody's part. So the CFL finds themselves in an interesting situation where there's only so many players that you really can kind of put up there as on the pedestal, and realistically, you have to choose wisely when you're trying to market this league. So it's an interesting little facet of the whole Tre Ford situation as well.
Sure is. Absolutely.
Any other final thoughts you wanted to get into before we wrap this one up?
No, congratulations to the Mexicas and the LFA for winning the Mexican Bowl 8 last night, 13-12 in a rain-soaked game against the Osas. Shout out to Jaya Wright for winning a championship after his IFL stint. So that was kind of cool to see. I know it's not really related to the CFL, but I wanted to throw it out there as a shout out. So
it may not be related to the CFL right now, but there might be some CFL teams out there that want to take a look at some of the players on that team. They're pretty talented team.
Undefeated season.
Yeah, so I mean that it's kind of crazy to think that they went undefeated and signed Jaya Wright like midway through the year, but
they had a national quarterback halfway through the year.
That's impressive. That's impressive. So that's another thing. Maybe the CFL needs to keep a little bit closer eye on the LFA and the ELF and really start leaning into some of the players in those leagues.
But also shout out to Shady Sports, to you for the platform, but also check out the my interview with the LFA commissioner. Leading up to the Mexican Bowl. He has some interesting things to say, and the CFL definitely could benefit from looking down south for talent, for sure.
I agree. There's a lot of talent around the world, and I think we're kind of entering a golden age, so to speak. We're watching football spread into countries that never once had it before. We're watching college programs prop up and pop up in countries across the world now, and CFL is kind of leading the way on growing the youth football market to help them kind of build their talent base in their own country, and hopefully in the years to come more countries can begin to do that, and we'll start seeing more and more players come out of these other countries that have been for lack of a better term neglected when it comes to the NFL and the biggest leagues in the world. So it'll be interesting to follow along with football over the next couple of years and the next decade or so, because I think we're witnessing a shift, and I think it's good for the world as a whole and the football community as a whole. Because let's be honest, the U.S. might be the dominant country currently with producing football players, but it would be better for everybody if we could find players globally. So looking forward to following along with that over the next couple of years. But Michael, man, appreciate you always coming on episodes and us being able to sit here and talk some CFL. I've really appreciated being able to chat with you about it and unpack some of these stories that come up, and it's been a lot of fun this season so far.
Yeah, we got more to come. So, without a doubt, by all means. But make sure you catch out that CFL game tonight. I think it's on CBS Sports. I think it's the only one this week that's on CBS Sports. So,
I think you're right.
If you're an American, check it out tonight. I think it's like a 7:00 start time, I believe, Eastern.
I believe you're right on that one. I'll have to look back. Also, yeah, as always, make sure to check out some of the other shows here on Shady Sports Network. We mentioned the spring showcase with talking LFA football. We covered all the indoor football leagues. We cover the NFL. We even have a show at this point that's talking a little bit of music. So if you're into hip hop or music in general, check out the Bus Stop Saturday mornings, 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We've got a wrestling show. We've got a little bit of everything. We also have merch. So check out brandingblanks.com. Look at the Shady Sports Network section. Go get you a shirt, a hat, a beanie, a hoodie, whatever your speed may be. And then we also have stickers as well. And if you wanted a sticker, you can DM any of the Shady Sports Network, most social media pages, and we'll get back to you on that. But most of all, we need you to jump over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. We are 10 subscribers away from 2,200, and we are really, really trying to push to hit 2,500 by the end of this month. It's a lofty goal. It's a goal we're technically on pace for right now, but we need your guys' help. So hop over there, hit the subscribe button. It's completely free to do, doesn't cost you a dime, and we definitely would benefit from all of you guys hopping over and turning on those notifications as well, so you catch all of our content. But on that note, we are out for today. Enjoy the game tonight, and we will catch you guys next Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern.